We can pay her half your salary. Gregory Finch laughed, leaning back comfortably in his executive chair. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. It's just business, Isabel, nothing personal, you understand. I stared at him across the wide expanse of his polished desk, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. The weight felt heavier than just wood and veneer, it felt like a barrier suddenly erected between us. The cheerful birthday card my colleagues had signed for me just hours earlier, filled with well wishes, was still tucked inside my purse, a painful, tangible reminder of the normalcy that had just shattered. The shock, the utter disbelief, must have been starkly evident on my face because he quickly continued, shifting his gaze towards the window. Look, Isabel, Chloe Jenkins has been here 6 months now. A bright young thing. You've trained her well, very well indeed. The pharmaceutical database system, the Phoenix Initiative, is running smoothly, largely thanks to your initial design, of course. But frankly, we don't need 2 people doing what amounts to 1 job anymore. Not at your salary level, anyway. Chloe knows the basics, I said slowly, each word a struggle as I fought to keep my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor I felt inside. But she doesn't understand the integration points, the underlying system architecture, the nuances that keep PI data from falling apart. Gregory waved his hand dismissively, a gesture I'd seen him use before when faced with technical details he didn't grasp. It's all documented in your process manuals, right? That's what I pay you for, the documentation, making things replicable. He leaned forward slightly, adopting a confidential tone that felt utterly false. Besides, young talent brings fresh perspectives. Sometimes, Isabel, your methods, well, they might be becoming a little dated. The industry is evolving rapidly. My name is Isabel Moreau, 43 years old, a single mother, and until approximately 5 minutes ago, I was the senior data architect at Viridian Dynamics. For 3 demanding, yet fulfilling years, I designed and meticulously maintained the complex system, the Phoenix Initiative, that tracked critical drug trials across multiple platforms. This system connected vital research data with stringent regulatory submission requirements for pharmaceutical companies across the entire country. Data integrity wasn't just a metric, it was potentially a matter of life and death. When Gregory hired Chloe Jenkins 6 months ago, fresh out of college, I had genuinely welcomed the help. The Phoenix Initiative system had grown increasingly complex, demanding constant vigilance. Having someone manage the day-to-day operational tasks would finally free me up to implement the significant architectural improvements I'd been carefully planning for months. Improvements that would ensure long-term stability and scalability. I'd spent countless hours, patient hours, training her, carefully walking her through the standard operating procedures, explaining the why behind each step. But there simply hadn't been enough time, amidst the daily pressures, to truly delve into the intricate underlying architecture, the invisible connective tissue, the fail-safes I'd painstakingly built, that made everything function seamlessly and reliably. I need your key card and company passwords before you leave today, Gregory continued briskly, sliding a thick envelope, the separation package, across the desk towards me. His gaze flickered past me again, avoiding direct contact. 2 weeks' pay, standard confidentiality clauses, the usual formalities. I picked up the envelope, my fingers numb. I scanned the document inside, the dense legal text blurring slightly through the sudden, unexpected sting of tears I refused to shed. Today is my birthday, I stated, the words falling flat, sounding hollow and almost pathetic even to my own ears. It wasn't an appeal, just a statement of cruel fact. Gregory actually had the decency to look uncomfortable, squirming slightly in his expensive chair for a fleeting moment. Ah. Yes. Sorry about the timing, Isabel. Truly. HR picked the date, you know how these things are. Out of my hands. Mechanically, feeling detached from my own actions, I signed the agreement where indicated, the pen strokes feeling foreign. Then I stood up, my legs surprisingly steady. Chloe will need the emergency protocols for when systems don't synchronize properly during data pushes. They're not fully detailed in the documentation, some require situational judgment. I'm sure she'll figure it out, Gregory replied distractedly, already checking notifications on his phone. His attention clearly elsewhere now that the unpleasant task was done. She's quite resourceful, that one. A quick learner. As I walked back to my desk, navigating the suddenly alien landscape of the office, and began numbly packing my personal belongings into a cardboard box, Chloe approached. Her expression was a painful mixture of sympathy and profound awkwardness. She looked pale, clearly distressed. "Isabel, I'm really, truly sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible, glancing nervously towards Gregory's closed door. "I had no idea this was happening. I swear." I managed a brief nod, not trusting myself to speak, the lump in my throat too tight. Words felt useless anyway. I handed her my system notebook, filled with critical operational notes and diagrams I'd compiled over the years. Just then, a bright red notification popped up on my computer screen, "Still logged in, alert. Database sync error on Sterling Medical Client Trial PI Data ASM7, manual resolution required." My stomach tightened. That was a critical client, a complex trial. I started to explain the specific error signature, the potential downstream consequences, the precise sequence needed to resolve it without data loss. But Gregory suddenly appeared at my elbow, his presence looming. He gestured firmly toward the exit, his face impassive. "Chloe's got this now, Isabel," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "She needs to learn sometime. It's time for you to go." I forced a tight, brittle smile onto my lips, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since the meeting began. "Good luck," I said, the words carrying a weight of sincerity, a premonition of disaster that neither he nor Chloe could possibly comprehend at that moment. "You'll need it." My path to Viridian Dynamics began after 18 years dedicated to the intricate world of database architecture. Armed with a master's in computer science, I'd built robust systems for insurance companies, complex retail chains, and finally, found my niche in the high-stakes pharmaceutical industry. Here, data integrity wasn't just important, it could literally be a matter of life and death, influencing patient safety and the success of multi-million-dollar drug trials. Clinical trial information had to be flawlessly, seamlessly integrated across diverse research platforms, intricate regulatory submission systems, and sensitive client dashboards, all with absolutely zero margin for error. Lives depended on that data being accurate. When Viridian recruited me, they were struggling, hemorrhaging credibility with an outdated, unstable system that frequently crashed, corrupting data and causing chaos. Within 6 intense months, I had completely redesigned their entire data architecture from the ground up. I created a robust, scalable integration framework that not only accommodated their complex, evolving needs but also rigorously maintained strict regulatory compliance, a non-negotiable requirement. Client satisfaction scores soared dramatically. More importantly, the company landed 3 major pharmaceutical contracts, Sterling Medical among them, based largely on the demonstrable strength and reliability of their innovative data management solutions. Solutions I had designed, built, and nurtured. Gregory Finch became my manager a year ago when the previous director, a man with a deep technical background, retired. Gregory came from sales, not technology, a fact that initially gave me pause, a quiet flicker of concern. But I consciously tried to remain open-minded, believing diverse perspectives could be beneficial. He spoke constantly, almost obsessively, about optimization and streamlining operations, frequently questioning why established processes couldn't be simplified, made leaner. "These verification steps seem excessive, Isabel," he'd comment during our review meetings, frowning at diagrams he didn't fully understand. "Couldn't we eliminate some of these redundancies to speed things up? Save some processing cycles?" Patiently, time and again, I'd explain that what looked like redundancy to his untrained eye was actually essential. Carefully layered error-catching architecture. The system's core strength, its resilience, lay precisely in its multiple, independent verification points. These checks prevented minor data corruption incidents from cascading catastrophically through the interconnected databases. A disaster scenario I'd worked tirelessly to prevent. Gregory would nod, making appreciative noises. But I could tell from the vacant look in his eyes that he wasn't fully grasping the critical technical nuances, the delicate balance of the system. He seemed more interested in the appearance of efficiency than in actual, long-term stability. Still, I convinced myself that his business perspective perhaps complemented my technical expertise, and we maintained a cordial if somewhat superficial, professional relationship. When he decided to hire Chloe, fresh out of a state university with a computer science degree but possessing absolutely no real-world experience in managing complex, high-risk data systems, I didn't object. Training a junior colleague seemed reasonable, a standard part of senior responsibilities, and honestly, I generally enjoyed sharing my knowledge. Mentoring young talent. Chloe was eager, undeniably bright, and quick to learn the specific operational procedures I laid out for her. However, she sometimes grew visibly impatient with the meticulous details, the necessary why behind the steps. Do we really need to run all these verification queries every single time, she'd ask, a hint of frustration in her voice? It adds nearly an hour to the data push process. That hour, Chloe, I'd explain calmly but firmly, prevents weeks, potentially months, of disastrous data recovery efforts if something goes wrong upstream. This system, despite its smooth operation, is more fragile underneath than it appears. Trust me on this. In recent weeks, looking back now with painful clarity, I'd noticed Gregory and Chloe in frequent private meetings, huddled together in his office. Doors closed. At the time, I innocently assumed they were discussing her professional development. Perhaps planning to officially expand her responsibilities under my continued guidance. I even started preparing additional, more advanced training materials, anticipating that she might soon take over some of my more routine system maintenance tasks, freeing me for higher-level architectural work. What I utterly failed to anticipate, blinded by my focus on the work itself, was becoming completely, brutally expendable. In retrospect, the signs were all there, waving like red flags I'd been too preoccupied or perhaps too trusting to see. Gregory's increasing, pointed questions about whether my established processes could be streamlined, his sudden, intense interest in detailed documentation of everything, the gradual, subtle exclusion from strategic planning meetings I used to lead. But I'd been too deeply engrossed in improving the intricate system I cared about, and ironically, in diligently training my own replacement, to recognize the political maneuvering happening just beneath the surface. The morning after my unceremonious termination, escorted out of the building like a common criminal on my 43rd birthday, I woke heavy-hearted to a jarring string of LinkedIn notifications buzzing on my phone. News of my abrupt departure from Viridian had apparently spread like wildfire through the tight-knit professional circles of data architecture. 3 former colleagues, respected peers in the industry, had already sent concerned messages expressing shock and kindly asking if I was looking for new opportunities. Their support was a small balm on a fresh wound. I spent the entire day grimly updating my resume, meticulously documenting projects and achievements, and researching suitable positions at other companies. I forced myself to focus on the future, on leveraging my skills and experience elsewhere, rather than dwelling on the raw humiliation of being discarded, of being walked out past the faces of my team, the small, uneaten birthday cake still sitting forlornly on my former desk. The thought of my child, of the college fund I was solely responsible for, fueled a grim determination. Failure wasn't an option. By evening, through sheer willpower and fueled by caffeine, I'd managed to line up 2 promising interviews for later in the week. The pharmaceutical data integration field was specialized, niche enough that experienced architects like myself were always in relatively high demand. My reputation, I hoped, preceded me. My personal phone rang jarringly just after dinner, interrupting my forced attempt at normalcy. The caller ID showed Noah Evans, a sharp, reliable software engineer from my former team at Viridian. "Isabel," he began, his voice tight with palpable stress, "I know you probably don't want to talk about Viridian work right now. And I totally get it, but I'm really stuck on something critical. The Phoenix Initiative database, specifically the Sterling Medical Trial data, PI data ASM7, is showing major inconsistencies after the routine Sunday maintenance update. I've tried everything in your documentation, run all the standard checks, but nothing's reconciling. The error logs are explosive." I instantly remembered the specific error notification I'd seen flashing on my screen just moments before Gregory had ushered me out the door. My stomach churned. "Did you run the specific verification sequence on the secondary audit tables, Noah?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, professional. "The one I outlined for cross-referencing batch integrity?" Yes, multiple times, he confirmed, frustration evident. But the primary and secondary systems simply aren't reconciling. There are huge gaps. Chloe said Mr. Finch told her to just force an override on the sync protocol to clear the alerts, but that doesn't seem right at all. It feels dangerous. I winced physically, closing my eyes. Force an override on that protocol? Madness. Definitely don't do that, Noah, I urged, my voice sharp with alarm. Under no circumstances. It could corrupt the entire Sterling trial data set beyond recovery. We're talking regulatory nightmare, huge financial penalties, potentially compromised patient data. That's exactly what I thought, Noah sighed, the relief in his voice audible even over the phone. I argued against it, strongly. I told Gregory we absolutely should call you, that you'd know what to do, but he shut me down hard. He said we needed to handle it internally now, prove we could manage without. He trailed off awkwardly. Without me, after providing some carefully worded guidance. Mindful not to explicitly violate the stringent confidentiality agreement I'd been forced to sign just hours before, I hung up the phone. Feeling a deeply unsettling mix of vindication and mounting concern. Vindication that my warnings about the system's complexity and the need for expertise were proving true. But profound concern for the integrity of the system I had poured years of my life into building and protecting. The system I designed was intricate, deliberately so. With carefully layered failsafes and complex interconnection points that weren't immediately obvious or intuitive without a deep, fundamental understanding of the underlying architecture. It wasn't designed for cowboys. 2 more calls came in later that evening, both from different, increasingly panicked team members at Viridian. Each described escalating problems, a domino effect of system failures rippling outwards from the initial Sterling medical sync issue. Apparently, Chloe, likely under pressure from Gregory, had indeed attempted to force an override. As I feared, this hadn't resolved the issue but had instead triggered cascading data corruption errors across multiple interconnected client databases linked to the Phoenix initiative. The Viridian Data Architecture Group was now officially in full-blown emergency mode, scrambling desperately to prevent irreversible data corruption from spreading further, potentially impacting regulatory filings and patient safety records. I stared at my phone when it rang a 4th time, just before midnight. The caller ID displayed Gregory Finch's name. I silenced the call and let it go to voicemail, a cold knot forming in my stomach. His inevitable, panicked message began moments later. Isabel. Pick up. We need to talk. It's urgent. I deleted it without listening further. The next morning, a Tuesday that felt worlds away from the previous Friday, I had an early interview scheduled with Keystone Biologics, one of Viridian's main competitors. The hiring manager, a Mr. Harrison with sharp eyes and a sharper suit, seemed genuinely impressed with my portfolio and extensive experience. Then came the inevitable question, "Your resume is stellar, Ms. Moreau. Why did you leave Viridian Dynamics?" "Restructuring," I replied simply, keeping my tone neutral, professional. They decided to streamline the data architecture group. Mr. Harrison leaned back, a skeptical eyebrow raised slightly. "Interesting timing," he remarked thoughtfully. "We just heard through the grapevine this morning that Viridian is experiencing major system issues. Something significant about corrupted clinical trial data, potentially involving Sterling Medical. A real meltdown, apparently." I kept my expression impassive, a mask of calm professionalism I had perfected over the years. "I wouldn't know anything about that, Mr. Harrison," I said smoothly. "As I mentioned, I'm no longer with the company. My focus now is purely on future opportunities." By Wednesday afternoon, the situation had shifted dramatically. I held official job offers from both Keystone Biologics and another major competitor in the pharmaceutical data space. Each offer came with a significantly higher salary than what I'd been earning at Viridian, along with a more senior title and broader responsibilities. A third company urgently requested an interview, specifically mentioning they'd heard excellent things about my data architecture skills and my ability to handle complex, high-stakes projects. My reputation, it seemed, was indeed intact, perhaps even enhanced by the rumors swirling around Viridian's sudden troubles. Meanwhile, my phone continued to buzz relentlessly with missed calls and urgent voicemails from Gregory Finch and other Veridian executive numbers. I didn't return a single one. The separation package I'd signed included no provision requiring me to provide post-termination assistance or consultation. Furthermore, professional ethics strictly prevented me from discussing Veridian's internal system problems, especially potential data breaches, with competitors or anyone outside the company, regardless of how I'd been treated. But as the calls became more frequent, more desperate in tone, Noah kept me discreetly informed via encrypted messages about the escalating chaos. I couldn't help but wonder just how badly things were unraveling at my former workplace. How deep was the hole Gregory had dug? By Thursday morning, my professional curiosity, mingled perhaps with a touch of grim satisfaction, got the better of me. When Gregory's name flashed again on my caller ID, I accepted the call on the first ring, bracing myself. Isabel, he practically sobbed into the phone, sheer, unadulterated relief flooding his voice. Thank God. Thank God you answered. We have a situation here. A major situation. So I've heard, I replied, keeping my voice deliberately neutral, devoid of emotion. Look, Isabel, I'll be direct, he rushed on, panic making his words tumble over each other. The system is in complete meltdown. Total chaos. After that initial sync error on Monday with the sterling data, everything it started falling apart. Client dashboards are showing wildly incorrect data, trial records are mismatched across platforms, and the regulatory submission module is flagging critical compliance errors across the board. Sterling Medical is threatening to pull their contract, Isabel. Today, I closed my eyes, picturing the precise cascade of failures he was describing, the exact catastrophic scenario my multi-layered verification protocols and architectural design were built to prevent. The scenario triggered by someone ignorantly or arrogantly bypassing those safeguards. Gregory, I cut in calmly, I signed a separation package. You terminated my employment. I am no longer an employee of Veridian Dynamics. I understand that perfectly, he said quickly, desperately. We'd bring you back immediately, as an independent consultant. An emergency engagement. Name your rate, Isabel. Anything. We just need you, your expertise, to fix this mess before the entire company goes under. The offer was undeniably tempting. Not primarily for the money, although the thought of charging an exorbitant rate had a certain appeal, but for the profound, righteous satisfaction of being proven utterly, devastatingly right. For the validation of my expertise that Gregory had so casually dismissed just days before. However, years of navigating corporate minefields had taught me caution. I knew better than to rush into anything fueled by emotion. If I were to consider this, I began slowly, deliberately, I would require full, unrestricted system access, administrator level, and complete autonomy to diagnose the issues and implement the necessary solutions without interference. My methods, my decisions. Absolutely. Yes. Anything. Gregory agreed immediately, the desperation palpable in his voice. Whatever you need. Carte blanche. Just tell me you'll help us. I will think about it, I replied coolly. I need to review my options. I will get back to you this afternoon with my decision and my terms. After hanging up, leaving Gregory dangling in his self-inflicted crisis, I immediately called Noah Evans for an unofficial, unfiltered assessment of the true situation on the ground. His grim description confirmed my worst suspicions and painted a picture even bleaker than Gregory's panicked summary. Chloe, inexperienced and likely overwhelmed, had indeed implemented a series of misguided, emergency fixes under Gregory's direction. These fixes, lacking any understanding of how the interconnected systems relied on each other, had only exacerbated the core problems, propagating errors exponentially. It's bad, Isabel. Really bad, Noah said quietly, his voice heavy with strain. Sterling Medical is furious, they're threatening legal action alongside pulling their contract. That's nearly 30% of the company's total revenue, gone. And there's serious talk internally, rumors flying about potential regulatory investigations if critical trial data has been irrevocably compromised. People are terrified. I spent the rest of the morning carefully weighing my options, pacing my small living room. The professional architect in me, the part that took immense pride in building elegant, robust systems, felt a powerful urge to intervene. To rescue the intricate creation I had poured so much of myself into. To fix what had been broken. The human part of me, however, the part that remembered the sting of dismissal on my birthday, the casual disregard for my years of dedication, felt a certain cold, sharp satisfaction in witnessing Gregory's utter desperation, his company teetering on the brink. He had made his bed. By noon, I had reached my decision. It was complex, layered, but clear. I called Gregory back. "I will help," I stated, my voice firm and businesslike. "My consulting rate is $300 per hour. There is a minimum engagement requirement of 40 hours, payable entirely upfront, before I set foot in your office. Wire transfer confirmation is required before I begin any work." There wasn't even a flicker of hesitation on his end. The desperation was absolute. "Done," Gregory choked out, the relief almost painful to hear. "Consider it done. The wire transfer is being initiated right now. When can you start?" "I estimate arrival at the Viridian offices in approximately 1 hour, pending confirmation of the wire transfer hitting my account." Walking back into the Viridian Dynamics building felt deeply surreal, like stepping into a scene from a bizarre parallel universe. The atmosphere in the office was thick with tension and anxiety. Former colleagues greeted me not with awkwardness, but with visible, almost overwhelming relief washing over their faces. Whispers followed me down the hall. Gregory hovered anxiously nearby, practically vibrating with nervous energy, a stark contrast to the dismissive manager of just a few days ago. One person was noticeably absent from the subdued chaos of the data architecture group area. "Where is Chloe?" I asked Gregory directly as he escorted me to a hastily cleared workstation, avoiding the one that used to be mine. He shifted his weight, his gaze darting away, unable to meet my eyes. "Ah, Chloe? She called in sick today," he mumbled, fiddling with his tie. The stress of the situation, I imagine. It's been intense for everyone." I logged into the system using the emergency administrator credentials Gregory provided, my fingers flying across the keyboard with familiar speed. I began my diagnostic assessment, diving deep into the system logs and error reports. The damage was extensive, more widespread than even Noah had realized, but it followed a tragically logical pattern. It was exactly what happens when someone who fundamentally doesn't understand the intricate architecture tries to force superficial solutions. Patching symptoms without ever addressing the underlying root causes. Like applying band-aids to a hemorrhage. By late afternoon, through focused, methodical work, I had managed to stabilize the most critical systems, containing the data corruption cascade. I developed a clear, multi-stage recovery plan for the remaining affected modules. Light was appearing at the end of a very dark tunnel. Gregory checked in frequently, pacing near my workstation, his relief growing visibly with each status update I provided. Each system indicator I managed to turn from red back to green. "You're a lifesaver, Isabel." "An absolute lifesaver," he gushed during one such visit, hovering too close. "I don't know what we were thinking, letting you go. A temporary lapse in judgment, clearly." I continued typing, focusing intently on the complex code script I was writing, offering no response. His belated, self-serving acknowledgement wasn't worth the breath it would take to reply. It meant nothing. As I was preparing to leave for the day, mentally exhausted but satisfied with the progress made, Gregory approached my workstation again. This time holding a thick folder with the Viridian logo. "Isabel," he began, attempting a warm, encouraging smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been authorized by Ms. Holloway herself to offer you your job back." He pushed the folder towards me across the desk. "Your previous position, Senior Data Architect. With a significant 15% raise, effective immediately, and a more senior title, Principal Architect. We recognize the immense value you bring." I glanced down at the glossy offer letter resting on top of the documents inside the folder, but made no move to touch it. "I will consider it after we successfully resolve the current crisis completely," I stated evenly. My voice betraying no hint of the swirling mixture of anger, vindication, and suspicion I felt. "My focus right now is solely on system recovery." Of course," he nodded eagerly, perhaps mistaking my noncommittal response for genuine consideration. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. But as I gathered my bag and jacket, my eyes happened to fall on Gregory's still open laptop sitting on the desk beside mine. An unread email notification was partially visible on his screen. It was from the CEO, Diana Holloway. The subject line read, "Transition Plan, One System is Stabilized." The visible preview text below the subject line was chillingly clear. "Get everything documented properly this time, Finch. Every step. Every protocol she implements. Before we make any further personnel changes." A sudden, icy chill washed over me, colder than the air conditioning humming overhead. They weren't genuinely offering me my job back out of a newfound appreciation for my skills or a sense of remorse. It was all a charade. They simply needed me, the expert they had discarded, to repair the catastrophic damage Gregory had caused. They needed me to meticulously document every single step of the complex recovery process so thoroughly that even someone like Chloe, or more likely, an even cheaper, less experienced replacement, could theoretically maintain it afterward by simply following a checklist. Then, once the system was stable and the knowledge transferred, they would discard me again. This time armed with my own documentation to ensure they wouldn't need me anymore. The decision I thought I had, the leverage I thought I possessed, was just another carefully constructed illusion in their corporate game. My consulting fee was simply the price they were willing to pay for my intellectual property. The next morning, Friday, I arrived exceptionally early, fueled by a cold, simmering anger and a newfound, razor-sharp focus. I needed to continue my recovery work, but now with a different endgame in mind. The system was responding well to my carefully implemented corrections. Data integrity was being restored. Client dashboards were slowly returning to normal, and the compliance flags were clearing one by one. I estimated another 2 or 3 solid days of work, perhaps into the weekend, before everything would be fully functional and stable again. I worked methodically, precisely, carefully documenting each step, each command executed, each configuration change made, not for Gregory's insidious future transition plan, but for my own meticulously kept records. Evidence. Around midday, the CEO herself, Diana Holloway, swept by my workstation, exuding an aura of controlled power and expensive perfume. "Isabel," she said, her voice smooth as silk, offering a practiced, warm smile that didn't quite reach her cool blue eyes. "I can't tell you how pleased we are, how relieved we are, that you've returned to help us navigate through this unfortunate crisis. Gregory speaks very, very highly of your expertise and your dedication." I nodded politely, my fingers never pausing on the keyboard, keeping my gaze fixed on the lines of code flowing across the monitor. "The core systems should be stable by Monday morning, Ms. Holloway." "Wonderful. Truly wonderful news," she replied, her smile faltering slightly at my distinctly lukewarm, focused response. "And I understand Gregory has already discussed your potential return to Viridian in a permanent, senior capacity?" "He mentioned the possibility," I replied curtly, still not looking up, refusing to play her game. Diana Holloway's perfectly sculpted smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the edges. My lack of enthusiasm was clearly not part of her script. "Well," she continued, regaining her smooth composure instantly, "we would be absolutely delighted to have you back on the team officially. Isabel, your contributions are clearly invaluable. Perhaps once this current situation is fully resolved, you and I could discuss the specifics over lunch next week?" "Perhaps," I agreed non-committedly, finally glancing up briefly, meeting her gaze with a neutral expression before returning my focus to the screen. After she glided away, leaving a faint trail of expensive perfume and unspoken corporate maneuvering in her wake, I took a much-needed short break. I stepped outside the building, needing fresh air to clear my head, the recycled office air suddenly feeling suffocating. As I stood leaning against the cool brick wall, scrolling absently through messages on my phone, a new text notification appeared from an unfamiliar number. "Isabel, it's Chloe Jenkins. I know you must be furious with me, and you have every right to be. But can we please talk? Somewhere private. It's really important." My curiosity piqued, mingled with a surprising flicker of sympathy for the young woman undoubtedly caught in the crossfire. I agreed via text to meet her at a small, quiet coffee shop across the street during my designated lunch break. When I arrived, Chloe was already there, hunched over a small table in the corner, looking pale, exhausted, and incredibly nervous. She jumped slightly when I approached. "Thank you so much for coming, Isabel," she stammered as I sat down opposite her, the aroma of coffee doing little to ease the tension in the air. I've been agonizing over whether I should tell you this, what the consequences might be. "Tell me what, Chloe?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice gentle but firm. Chloe glanced around the nearly empty coffee shop nervously, as if expecting Gregory or Miss Holloway to materialize from the shadows. Before leaning forward conspiratorially, "The system failure, the initial sterling medical data corruption," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It wasn't entirely an accident, not just me messing up the procedures." I felt my body go utterly still, a cold dread mixing with the anger already simmering inside me. "Explain," I commanded, my voice low and intense. "Mr. Finch," she began, twisting a paper napkin in her hands, "he asked me to implement some optimizations to the core system last week. Specific changes that would streamline the data verification processes, bypass some of the checks you put in place. He told me you had already approved the concept in principle, Isabel, but that you were just too busy with other projects to implement it yourself right now. He made it sound like I was helping you, helping the team. I never approved any such changes," I stated flatly, my voice tight with controlled fury. "Those verification protocols are fundamental to the system's integrity. Bypassing them is reckless endangerment of client data." "I know that now," Chloe admitted miserably, tears welling up in her eyes. "I realized it later, especially when things started going wrong right after the Sunday update, when the first alerts about Sterling Medical came in on Monday morning. I told Mr. Finch immediately that we needed to stop everything and call you for help. He absolutely refused. He said calling you would just validate your overcomplicated, belt and suspenders approach, as he put it. He insisted that we could fix it ourselves, that it was a minor glitch, that I needed to show initiative." She fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking, and pulled up a saved screenshot of a company chat exchange with Gregory from Monday morning. His messages were chillingly clear, explicitly instructing her to attempt various risky fixes without contacting me. Even as her own replies expressed increasing alarm and concern about the escalating problems and unexpected error messages. He'd repeatedly told her to handle it and show some backbone. By the time he finally decided he had no choice but to call you on Thursday, Chloe continued, her voice cracking. "I was a complete wreck. I was having full-blown panic attacks. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just knowing what we'd done, what I'd done by blindly trusting him, by being too scared to push back harder." "Why are you telling me all of this now, Chloe?" I asked, studying her distraught face intently. Chloe's eyes overflowed, tears tracing paths down her pale cheeks. "Because," she choked out, "because they're planning to blame everything on me, Isabel. All of it. Yesterday afternoon, HR called me into a formal meeting. They said they're conducting an internal investigation into procedural violations and unauthorized system modifications that led directly to the massive system failure. Mr. Finch told them, he told HR and legal, that I made critical, unauthorized changes to the system entirely on my own initiative, directly against his specific instructions and warnings. He's throwing me under the bus to save himself." The final, ugly pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with sickening, brutal clarity. Gregory hadn't just been incompetent or negligent, he had deliberately, actively undermined the complex system architecture I had painstakingly built. Likely, as Chloe suggested, to prove that his simplistic, streamlined approach was superior. Perhaps to impress Ms. Holloway with cost-saving initiatives, driven by his own past failures and desperate need for a win. When his reckless gamble inevitably blew up, spectacularly, he desperately needed my expertise to fix the multi-million-dollar mess. But afterward, the plan was clear. Chloe, the inexperienced junior scapegoat, would take the official fall. Gregory would emerge as the decisive manager who successfully handled the crisis with my unacknowledged help and identified the supposed culprit. And Ms. Holloway would get her optimized, cheaper system, eventually. "I actually have a job offer from Keystone Biologics," Chloe added quietly, wiping her eyes. The one you interviewed with? Mr. Harrison contacted me too, after hearing about you leaving Viridian. I was going to accept it immediately, before all this chaos erupted. But now Mr. Finch is threatening me. He says if I resign now, or if I don't cooperate with their internal investigation narrative, meaning accept the blame, he'll give me such a negative reference, such a damning review, that I'll never be able to work in pharmaceutical data management anywhere in the country. He said he'd personally make sure of it. A surge of cold, righteous anger flooded through me. Not just for the way I had been treated anymore, but for Chloe too. Yes, she was young, inexperienced, perhaps naive. But she didn't deserve to be manipulated, exploited, and then ruthlessly scapegoated to protect a cowardly, incompetent manager and a cynical CEO. Forward me those chat screenshots, Chloe, I said, my mind already racing, formulating a new plan, a counter-strategy. And any other emails, messages, or documentation you have related to Gregory's instructions about these system optimizations, everything. As Chloe, looking both terrified and relieved, began compiling the digital evidence on her phone and emailing it to my personal address, I realized I had a critical decision to make. I could simply complete my consulting work, collect my hefty fee, accept one of the lucrative job offers from Keystone or elsewhere, and walk away, leaving Viridian Dynamics to rot in its own toxic culture. Let Gregory and Diana face the consequences, or manipulate their way out of them. Or I could take decisive action. Action that might not only salvage Chloe's nascent career but potentially expose Gregory's deliberate sabotage and Ms. Holloway's complicity, perhaps protecting other employees from similar fates in the future. The choice, when framed that way, felt surprisingly obvious. Necessary, even. Back at the Viridian office after my lunch, I continued the complex system recovery work, but now with a renewed, steely purpose. While my hands expertly manipulated code and restored data integrity, my mind was busy developing a different kind of solution, a strategy for accountability. What I needed now was absolute, irrefutable evidence of Gregory's deliberate actions. Hard proof that couldn't be easily dismissed as a simple misunderstanding, technical confusion, or the mistake of an inexperienced junior employee. I recalled something Noah had mentioned in passing months ago during a discussion about regulatory audits. All significant system changes, especially those involving administrator-level access, were automatically logged, timestamped, and archived on a separate, highly secure compliance logging server, the audit log server, specifically for regulatory compliance and traceability purposes. Access was restricted, but the emergency admin credentials Gregory had given me should grant access. Those logs, if Gregory hadn't managed to tamper with them too, would show exactly who had authorized the fatal optimizations, precisely when they were implemented, and from which terminal. During a brief lull late Friday afternoon, when the office was mostly empty as people fled for the weekend, I navigated the Viridian network to the secure audit log server. My admin credentials worked. My heart pounded as I initiated the search query, and there it was. Clear as day. The logs unequivocally showed that Gregory Finch had used his high-level administrative override privileges to approve and implement significant, dangerous changes to the core data verification protocols earlier that week. Changes that directly contradicted the established, approved system architecture documentation I had authored. Most damning of all, he had then attempted to cover his tracks. The logs showed a subsequent entry where he had manually backdated the approval timestamp for these critical changes by several weeks, clearly trying to make it appear as though these reckless modifications had been pending in the system for some time, perhaps implying my tacit, or at least prior, awareness or acceptance. It was clumsy, arrogant, and utterly damning. I quickly downloaded the relevant log files, focusing on the specific timeframes and actions, onto a secure, encrypted USB drive I carried in my purse. Then, as a backup, I sent myself a heavily encrypted email containing the compressed log files. For good measure, I also took clear, timestamped screenshots comparing the original implementation timestamps of the changes versus the obviously backdated approval entries. Smoking gun. Meet digital footprint. Now, I needed to understand the extent of the conspiracy. Had Diana Holloway actively known about Gregory's plan to sabotage the system from the beginning? Perhaps even encouraging it as a means to justify my removal and push through his streamlining? Or was she merely opportunistic? Complicit only after the fact, cynically using the crisis Gregory created as a convenient excuse to rehire me temporarily, extract my knowledge, and then discard me again? The answer arrived with startling, unexpected ease just moments later, as Gregory returned to my workstation for a final end-of-day status update. A calendar notification alert popped up prominently on his still unlocked laptop screen, meeting reminder. Discuss IM transition plan, documentation handover with DH, 4:30 p.m. conference room B. IM. Isabel Moreau. DH. Diana Holloway. The confirmation I needed. I think I need a bit more time to finalize the diagnostics on the regulatory reporting module before the weekend, I told Gregory smoothly. Inventing a plausible reason to stay later. It's throwing some complex flags I want to resolve before Monday, probably another hour or so. You go ahead to your meeting with Ms. Holloway, don't let me hold you up. Excellent work today, Isabel, he said, clearly relieved to be escaping to his meeting. Keep me posted. Once he hurried off towards conference room B, I quickly finished the actual critical work I was doing on the system recovery. Then, I implemented one final, discrete safety measure, a hidden, deeply embedded diagnostic tool I designed previously for monitoring system integrity. This tool would silently alert me, via encrypted notification to my personal email address, to any unauthorized or anomalous changes made to the core system architecture or critical verification protocols after my departure. It wasn't technically part of my consulting agreement's scope of work, but I mentally justified it as necessary professional due diligence. Insurance. At precisely 5:15 p.m., I packed up my belongings, the encrypted USB drive safely tucked away. I was ready to leave for the weekend, leaving the system significantly stabilized. The Phoenix initiative was now approximately 80% recovered, with only relatively minor, non-critical issues remaining, issues I could likely resolve remotely over the next couple of days if needed. Fulfilling my 40-hour minimum engagement. As I walked towards the elevators, my path took me past conference room B. The door was slightly ajar. I heard Gregory's voice, raised in clear frustration. But she's fixing everything, Diana, he was saying, sounding exasperated. The recovery is going remarkably well. Sterling is calming down. Can't we at least wait until everything is fully stable on Monday before we, finalize the transition? Diana Holloway's response was cool, sharp, and utterly devoid of emotion. Crystal clear through the slightly open door. The decision is made, Gregory. Don't be naive. Once Ms. Moreau submits her final recovery documentation on Monday morning, we thank her profusely for her invaluable consulting work, pay her final invoice promptly, and then we proceed immediately with the transition to the simplified, more cost-effective architecture you proposed. Chloe Jenkins was just a somewhat disastrous trial run for proving the concept. We've already identified another promising junior developer from the State University program who can maintain the streamlined system, your streamlined system, at an even lower salary point than Jenkins. And, she added, her voice dropping slightly but still audible, laced with pure cynicism, if, perish the thought, this is simplified system fails again down the line, it won't reflect poorly on us, because Isabel Moreau, our highly paid consultant, will have meticulously documented every single aspect of the recovery process from this incident. That documentation becomes our insurance policy, our roadmap. That, Gregory, was the entire point of bringing her back as a consultant in the first place. Leverage her expertise, document it, then cut the cord cleanly. I'd heard more than enough. My blood ran cold. I slipped away silently, pressing the elevator button before they could emerge from the conference room and potentially see me. A strange, almost unnerving calm settled over me as the elevator descended. The anger was still there, but it was now overlaid with icy resolve. I now possessed all the concrete evidence I needed, Gregory's deliberate sabotage, the backdated logs, the chat instructions to Chloe, and now confirmation of the CEO's cynical, premeditated plan. And I had the entire weekend to decide exactly how, and when, to use it most effectively. Sunday evening, as I was finalizing my own report and preparing my strategy, a text message arrived from Gregory. System looking very stable this evening, Isabel. Excellent progress. Just need your final documentation package tomorrow morning to officially close out your consulting engagement as planned. CEO wants to meet at 9 a.m. sharp to receive it personally. I replied simply, maintaining the facade, acknowledged. I will be there at 9 a.m. with the final documentation and invoice. What Gregory didn't know, what Diana Holloway didn't anticipate, was that I had spent a significant portion of my weekend engaged in two very specific consultations. First, with a highly recommended labor attorney specializing in wrongful termination and corporate whistleblowing cases. Second, with a respected independent regulatory compliance expert, a former FDA official, who had expressed significant professional concern, bordering on alarm, about the evidence I presented regarding the deliberate manipulation and attempted cover-up involving validated pharmaceutical trial data systems at Viridian Dynamics. I had also, earlier that Sunday evening, formally accepted the principal architect position at Keystone Biologics, effective Tuesday. My acceptance included one specific, non-negotiable condition regarding staffing, which Keystone's forward-thinking CEO, after hearing my brief, discreet explanation, had readily and happily accommodated. Monday morning at Viridian Dynamics was going to bring answers to devastating questions Gregory Finch and Diana Holloway didn't even know were being asked. And I would be ready. I arrived at the Viridian Dynamics executive suite at exactly 9 a.m. on Monday morning. I carried a slim, professional portfolio containing not just my final consulting invoice and the system recovery documentation they expected, but several other carefully prepared documents as well. Diana Holloway's impeccably dressed executive assistant showed me into the main conference room with a polite, professional smile. Inside, Diana Holloway and Gregory Finch were already seated at the long, polished table. Flanking them were two individuals I didn't recognize, a stern-faced woman in a severe charcoal gray suit who radiated HR authority, and a pale, nervous-looking man clutching a legal pad who practically screamed in-house counsel. The stage was set for my formal dismissal. Isabel, thank you for coming in so promptly, Diana began, deploying her practiced warmth like a weapon. This is Patricia Belmont from Human Resources, and our counsel, Jonathan Avery. They're joining us this morning simply to formalize the successful conclusion of your emergency consulting engagement and process your final payment. Everything is in order, I trust? I offered a cool, pleasant smile in return, taking a seat opposite them. Perfectly convenient, I replied smoothly. As it happens, I've also brought some documentation today that requires legal and regulatory review. Before anyone could react to my unexpected statement, the conference room door opened again. Noah Evans entered first, looking resolute. He was followed closely by Chloe Jenkins, who looked terrified but determined, and behind them walked two serious-looking individuals in dark, conservative suits who most definitely were not Viridian Dynamics employees. Their calm, observant demeanor spoke volumes. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Diana Holloway demanded sharply, half rising from her chair, her composure finally cracking. The mask slipping. Gregory, did you authorize this? I invited a few additional participants whose input is relevant to this discussion, I stated calmly, my voice steady and clear in the suddenly silent room. Noah and Chloe have first-hand knowledge pertinent to the events leading up to and including the system failure. I gestured towards the two men standing impassively near the door. And these gentlemen are compliance officers from the FDA's Office of Regulatory Affairs and Compliance. They informed me they are extremely interested in the sequence of events surrounding the Phoenix Initiative data integrity issues over the past week. The color drained instantly from Gregory Finch's face, leaving it a pasty gray. He stared at the compliance officers in disbelief. The FDA, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. But, this is an internal company matter. A personnel issue. Actually, Mr. Finch, one of the compliance officers interjected smoothly, stepping forward slightly. His voice calm but carrying undeniable authority, deliberate tampering with validated systems managing critical pharmaceutical trial data. Especially when it involves potential data corruption and attempts to conceal systemic failures, falls squarely within our regulatory jurisdiction. Ms. Moreau contacted our office late last week, the officer continued, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces at the table. Providing credible evidence suggesting serious regulatory compliance violations occurred here at Viridian Dynamics. I opened my portfolio. I calmly distributed copies of a comprehensive, meticulously documented report to everyone at the table, including the compliance officers. The report detailed the original system architecture, the specific unauthorized changes implemented by Gregory, the chronology of the system collapse, the evidence of the attempted cover-up including the backdated logs and communication records, and a preliminary assessment of the impact on client data integrity, specifically referencing Sterling Medical. The final page contained my sworn, notarized statement attesting to the accuracy of the information presented, followed by my signature. This document constitutes my final consulting report and documentation, as requested, Ms. Holloway, I said, sliding the original copy across the polished table towards her. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. Furthermore, I continued, meeting her gaze directly, my voice ringing with quiet confidence. I wish to inform you that I have formally accepted a position as principal architect with Keystone Biologics, starting tomorrow. My first official assignment, already approved by Keystone leadership and communicated to Sterling Medical's executives, is to develop and implement a comprehensive rescue and migration plan for all Viridian clients, including Sterling, who wish to transfer their critical data assets to a more stable, secure, and ethically managed platform. Diana Holloway's carefully maintained composure finally, completely shattered. "You can't do this," she hissed, her voice rising, forgetting the FDA officials momentarily. "Those clients are under binding contract with Viridian Dynamics." "Contracts, Ms. Holloway," I corrected her calmly but firmly, with specific, legally binding performance guarantees regarding data integrity and system reliability. Guarantees that Viridian Dynamics, under your leadership and through the documented actions of Mr. Finch, has demonstrably, catastrophically breached. My attorney has already reviewed the relevant contract clauses in detail. Keystone's legal team concurs. The FDA compliance officers began asking sharp, pointed questions directed at Gregory and Diana, focusing on change management protocols, data validation procedures, administrative access controls, and incident reporting timelines. The atmosphere grew thick with legal jeopardy. As the regulatory interrogation intensified, with Gregory stammering denials and Diana desperately trying to deflect blame onto procedural errors and junior staff mistakes, I quietly gathered my portfolio and stood up. I gave a small, subtle nod to Noah and Chloe, who were now providing their own corroborating statements to the second compliance officer near the door. My work here, at Viridian Dynamics, was definitively finished. 6 months later, I sat in my spacious new corner office at Keystone Biologics, reviewing the impressive quarterly performance report for the data architecture division I now led. The transition of former Viridian Dynamics clients, including the massive Sterling Medical account, had gone remarkably smoothly, exceeding all expectations. This success was thanks in no small part to the hard work and dedication of Noah Evans, now a senior engineer on my team, and Chloe Jenkins, who, freed from her toxic previous environment and student loan anxieties thanks to a signing bonus I'd negotiated for her, was thriving as a talented and meticulous data analyst in our group. The latest industry newsletter lay open on my desk. A small, discreet item near the back noted that Viridian Dynamics, after experiencing significant, crippling client attrition and facing substantial regulatory challenges and penalties, had been quietly acquired by a larger, less specialized competitor for pennies on the dollar. Its assets were being absorbed, its name effectively erased from the industry landscape. The article mentioned briefly that both Gregory Finch and Diana Holloway had pursued other opportunities, following the conclusion of the FDA investigation into data integrity violations and subsequent shareholder lawsuits. Their careers in the pharmaceutical data sector were effectively over. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. A scheduled video conference call with our newest major pharmaceutical client, the company that had formerly been Viridian's largest, most prestigious account before Sterling Medical. Their chief research officer had specifically, personally requested that I oversee the architecture design for their next-generation data platform. Citing my exceptional reputation for system integrity, technical brilliance, and unwavering professional ethics. As I prepared to launch the video call, Chloe Jenkins knocked softly on my open door frame, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "Just wanted to remind you, Isabel," she said warmly, "don't forget the team celebration dinner tonight. It's officially 1 year since Noah and I started here with you." I smiled back, a genuine warmth spreading through me. Remembering the slightly tense negotiation day when I had insisted to Keystone's CEO that bringing both Noah and Chloe onto my team was a non-negotiable part of my acceptance package. He had been initially skeptical, questioning the need to hire 2 additional staff members sight unseen. But his skepticism vanished after I briefly, discreetly explained their potential long-term value. Their first-hand knowledge of Viridian's failures useful for client migration, and, more importantly, their demonstrated loyalty and courage in providing the crucial evidence that helped expose Viridian's unethical practices and protect vital client data. Integrity, I had argued, was priceless. He had agreed. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Chloe," I assured her sincerely. As she turned to leave, a quiet notification chime sounded from my desktop. The enhanced diagnostics system I had designed and implemented here at Keystone, incorporating all the hard-won lessons from the Viridian debacle, alerted me that all client databases, including the newly migrated Sterling Medical data, had successfully completed their rigorous hourly verification cycles without a single anomaly. Perfect synchronization. Perfect integrity. The robust, resilient architecture I designed and managed here was even more sophisticated, more secure than my previous work at Viridian. Experience, even painful experience, was a powerful teacher. Some might view the downfall of Viridian, the demise of Gregory's and Diana's careers, as an act of calculated revenge on my part. But I saw it differently, more simply. It wasn't personal retaliation, it was merely the inevitable, natural consequence of a corporate culture that valued short-term cost savings and superficial appearances over genuine expertise, proven experience, and fundamental integrity. They hadn't just undervalued their systems, they had fundamentally undervalued and disrespected the people who built, maintained, and protected those systems. In the end, I hadn't needed to actively destroy Viridian dynamics. Their own arrogance, incompetence, and short-sightedness had accomplished that quite effectively all on their own. I closed the performance report, took a deep breath, and opened the video conference link, ready to connect with our new client. Ready to demonstrate, once again, the enduring, indispensable value of doing things right.